Good afternoon, everybody. We open with some sad news, and that's the passing of Bill Rasmussen. Bill died today at the age of 93 years old. For those who may or may not know, Bill has been battling Parkinson's disease for almost a decade now. And he was the guy who came up with the idea of starting ESPN. And Matt, I'll tell you what, in the early days of ESPN, it wasn't easy um, to get people to even uh, come up with the concept of what a bill was trying to do. And, it's had he not been so diligent at what he wanted to do, I'm not so sure this thing would ever gotten off the ground.
Yeah, it wasn't something that had really been done before. You were
Mm,
basing an entire industry, essentially breaking ground on what is a new industry and where we are
mhm,
now in sports media and how large it is. And I guess providing not only around the clock coverage, but national coverage in the way that they did was, revolutionary at the time. And
mhm.
we would be where we are in sports media. You think about how everybody has a voice and just how available all this information is to us. It all starts from there.
Yeah, the thing about Bill was, and a lot of people forget this, Bill was the PR guy and the head of broadcasting for the Hartford Whalers. And the whole concept of using Hughes, the satellite company at that time, we used to all have to book satellite time on Hughes. Well, Bill had come to one of the sales guys at Hughes that there were some transponders that weren't being used at all. So Bill said, "Well, what would it take to have one of these 24/7?" And he told him, and the money wasn't that bad in those days for sure. And so what happened is Bill decided, okay, what if we did a 24-hour sports network? Now again, he had no rights to anything. He was just going to put it together with Sports Center and then go out and use tape delayed content which they could get from different vendors and put it on and then produce some programming that they could afford to produce. And so he hired some of the first people he hired were, of course, Chris Berman, Bob Lee. I mean, those were some of the guys that he brought on. Greg Gumbel was one of them. Dave Sims was one of them. There was a bunch of young people out there that he decided they were going to hire, and you know, it, and it was he went to four or five different you know traditional media people. Scripps Howard was one of them. So it was the Cox people, and everybody just said, Bill, nice idea, but don't quit your day job. This is not going to work. And it's hard to believe it. Had it not been for the 1984 Cable Television Act, which allowed people to bundle content, we may never have gotten ESPN because that was the lifeblood that gave it the amount of money that it needed to really get off the ground. We used to, when I did stuff for ESPN, we used to have to go out and meet with the cable operators and try to explain to them, this is really going to be something someday, right? Not today, but someday it's going to be something. And the first rights we had actually um, was the NASL, which is soccer, and then of course the Big uh, Big East basketball. And so it was quite an interesting combination of things that we had at that time. And Bill sold the network to the Hughes Corporation into uh, Getty Oil and left it in 1980 once he got Scotty Connell and and Chet Simmons, who ran NBC Sports, to go to Bristol. Now, many people wonder why Bristol, Connecticut. Well, Bristol, Connecticut was almost exactly halfway between Boston and New York, and it was the only place in that little area, that little swath of you know Connecticut, and New York, where you didn't have to be a union person to work. Because if this was a union shop, it would have cost so much money they would never have been able to do it. So the long and the short of it was that Bill had a dream, and much like Turner and others at that time, cable needed things like this, and Bill, had a steadfast idea, and the ESPN that Bill built and was later, Chet Simmons and the rest of the gang put together is not the ESPN that we see today. It was never that. It was always going to be uh, a true and enjoyable, you know, pretty much straight sports news, not a lot of commentary in it, um, and not hot takes or anything like that. It was always, stick to the most important things, which is what sports is all about, which is telling stories and play by play, sports. And so that was Bill's vision. It was held into the mid 80s and early 90s, and then things started to move in different directions. But we all have a great deal of thanks, if you are a fan of sports television, to Bill Rasmussen. And may his memory be for a blessing, and may he rest in peace, Bill Rasmussen. Later on, folks, I will have posted a podcast that we did with Bill about 5 or 6 years ago, and we had some fun talking about the early days of ESPN, and so I'll post that up there a little bit later today. So that brings us to what Matt and I had originally wanted to talk to everybody about, and it's college football, which isn't that far away. The Associated Press um, has brought their brand new latest edition of their preseason poll, which has the Big Ten Ohio State Buckeyes and the Big Ten. It's hard for me to keep saying Big Ten Oregon Ducks, but they're 1-2. But there's more SEC teams in that poll than there are any other teams in the of the entire group, which shouldn't surprise anyone.
Yeah, no, that's typically the lay of the land, and I have been surprised just in some brief conversations I've had, because there will be people that'll ask me, who I think is going to win the national title,
Mm-hmm.
and I've thrown the number 2 team in the country in Oregon out there a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it seems like a lot of times people are more surprised by it than anything, which I'm a little bit confused by how Oregon appears to be flying under maybe not a national radar, because I think
Right.
they're on plenty of analysts, a lot of the media people. I think they're on their radar. But in terms of common household, everyday fan that you're going to talk to, I don't know if it's a lack of belief because they haven't done it, or what the overall thought process is. Maybe they just don't view them in the same air as Ohio State. But Oregon apparently is flying under the radar in terms of a national contender amongst the common fan, it appears.
I don't how I'm with you. I'm a little nonplussed by it, because you're sitting there going, well, Dan Lanning has proven time and time again that he's got a good football team. He can recruit. I think personally, I would put Dan Lanning out there against any coach in the country, given the fact that if you've ever been out to that lovely place in Oregon, it's beautiful, but it's not exactly, the kind of college town that you can, lure a bunch of 5-star players to.
Yeah, no, and I mean their NIL definitely does a good bit of heavy lifting for them in terms of
Right.
where they're at with their team, but their talent retention is really impressive, and it's something that
Mm-hmm.
is going to, you talk about I feel like there's requires a special marriage in terms of when you're looking at a national title contender and what
Mm-hmm.
makes one. And it was a large storyline, however dominating it was slash should have been. Maybe it was a little bit more dominant than it should have been last year. But talking about Indiana's age on their roster and just
Mm-hmm.
how veteran you would describe their roster as, and what ultimately was a historic team for them. And that's where you kind of have to look. You need to look at the veteran and return players, see who's returning how much production. Oregon's returning a lot of it. They're returning the
Mm-hmm.
most important position at quarterback. Not only are they returning the most important position, but they also have an insurance plan at quarterback if something were to happen to Dante Moore. They
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're one of the deepest teams in America. And it feels like a if not now, then when almost kind of a deal for Dan
Mm-hmm.
Lanning because all of the chips are set up right. I'm not saying that after this year, they're like this is falling off a cliff,
Right.
but they're really well set up for success this year.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm going to say the four best. I mean, the four obvious choices for me in potential national champions. I would say Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, and maybe Miami. Depends on what Mario's got. Those would be my five, you know, teams that I would give the edge right now. I don't give it. Ohio. I don't see the Ohio. I see Ohio State's talent, but I just don't see Ohio State as the eventual national champion.
Yeah, I'm going to throw one more in there because I have a lot of belief in their defense and in that
Mhm.
defensive mind. That's Oklahoma.
Could be.
Huh?
I could be.
Yeah, it's more about just how good their defense was and how far their defense got them last year.
Hmm.
It's something where I don't feel like they lost on that defensive line. Our Mason Thomas isn't there, and I get that, but they were able to reload and kind of you know retain also at the same time that defensive front from last year, a good bit of it. And I feel really good about their defense. And to go along with their defense, you got to feel really good about the overall transformation you've seen, at least physically, from John Mateer. Obviously, he was battling that hand injury at the end of the season. Suffered it in the middle of the season, never really returned to the form that you saw the first half of the year. If
Hmm.
they get that version back, and apparently it's a version of himself that he has worked on in terms of his throwing motion, they have a chance to be, a really dynamic offense, and they don't have to be a great offense. I think that's the beautiful thing with the defense that they're going to have.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, from a standpoint of outsiders who could do this, right? Who could come in. Um, I don't know. I don't know what to think of LSU. I mean, there's going to be incredible national media scrutiny on everything Lane does at LSU. So, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I mean, talent wise, they're going to be good, but I just don't know under the Klieg lights of everything that goes on that comes with Lane and the circus that he brings with him. What's going to happen?
It almost feels like LSU's in this like near impossible situation, if I'm being honest, and that comes from a place of they've got a lot of big names in that room, and everybody got a lot of big dollars, and
Mm-hmm.
so you're mixing egos, new play styles, and you're trying to mesh that all together. And what is just not enough time by my measure. And I mean, there's a chance that they're able to, kind of scrape by for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they find themselves where they're getting comfortable at the end of the year, and they don't have, maybe they only have a loss on the schedule, or maybe they have no loss on the schedule. Maybe they've been, sorted their way through it. And you get 6 weeks in, you start to feel comfortable. Then they can go on a run. But you're asking a lot of things to mesh well to reach, because people have put national title like that. That's where they've put the stakes for LSU, and it just seems like that's a bit much in terms of what to expect out of them this year.
Well, this is not. I know it's the age of instant teams, right? But
Hmm.
it's not the age of instant. I mean, Singretti and and I'm just trying to say that Kurt and and the LSU situation is a totally different situation, and to me, coaching wise, talent wise, Segretti was able to kind of sail under the radar. Lane Kiffin is on every radar.
Yeah, yeah. Coach Signetti didn't have the same. You're walking in with a target on your back. Indiana, even after, the season that they had,
Right.
the year before, last year they still weren't. Were still able to sneak up on people. People kind of saw it as a one-hit wonder. They saw that loss at Notre Dame, and so when
Mm-hmm.
you look at the way they played their non-conference, and especially the way they started against Old Dominion, it just kind of felt like
Mm-hmm.
it, they're doing well, but they're gonna get got eventually, and so they were almost able to fly under the radar in that nature. And that's not the same case for Lane Kiffin. That's not going to be the case week one. That's not going to be the case against Southeastern Tech that they're going to play probably week two. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're going into these places with targets on their back. Clemson is already an underdog in the season of itself,
Mm-hmm.
much less with LSU coming to their house. I mean, look, when Dabo had that chip to play at Clemson,
Right.
and when they were a national title contender, it was because of his ability to play. We are the underdog, and no one believes in us. And I think some of the reason that Clemson lost their way was their inability to play that chip. That chip's back, and it's back in as
Mm-hmm.
big a way as possible with LSU coming to town week one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, if Dabo and Clemson is going to make a case for themselves to be, thought of again as a national power, they got to win that game against LSU.
Yeah, maybe not have to win, but it has to be. It can't be something where you feel like LSU's been in control. Like there has to be a legitimate threat from Clemson. It has to end in a close game, and they have to be able to build on it from there. Because
Mm-hmm.
this is a day and age where you can lose a game or two and you can still make the playoff. And I think that's more how Clemson and Dabo is going to be judged this year, as opposed to boiling it down to a 1 game sample. But
Yeah.
it is incredibly important for them to get off to a good start, because you've seen what good starts can do for talented football teams that maybe just need to believe in themselves a little bit more. And, and Clemson's talent profile now versus what it was like when they were winning national titles are different. They don't have the same level of athlete. They don't have the same level of depth, but they're still a really talented football team, one of the most talented star rating wise in the ACC, and they have every ability to go out and win an ACC title this year the same way they used to. But I almost feel like there's maybe a little bit of a lack of belief in that building that Dabo has not been able to reinstill.
Yeah, I think you're right, but the thing that I think is more that we just talked about Lane, and I don't. The reason I say that I think that this one is one that they can get, meaning um, Clemson can get, is because I think that the problem is that Clemson and LSU playing each other. Uh, LSU, um, if they're, I don't think I want to play them first thing in the first thing out of the gate, because there's no way they can grasp everything that Lane wants them to grasp in week one.
No, no,
It, and that's
it's
why I
a
think
tough adjustment.
Dabo's he's got that opportunity to really come out of this looking really good.
Yeah, he absolutely does. You're not wrong about that. And I that's part of what makes you think like this is the expectations are lofty, and that feels like an understatement for Lane Kiffin. And I don't want to sit here and try to give Lane Kiffin more credit than he's due, but
Hmm.
there are people that have put the expectation of like this is a national championship kind of team, and that just doesn't seem feasible for this year. Not that it doesn't seem feasible, not that they don't have the talent on the roster, but it seems like it's unreasonable for that to be the expectation going into the year, given, their overall, I guess they're you're asking them to gel so quickly, and there's so many big personalities in the room. I compare it kind of to the Mets,
Yeah,
and you've heard stories about how they've had a hard time kind of almost getting people to set egos aside, and now
sure.
you're asking a room full of highly paid 20-year-olds to do the exact same thing.
Well, and you're also asking them to basically go, don't worry about don't worry about what happened before. Um, we're going to do this, and you know, this is not a rah 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 situation. There's there's a lot of stuff on the line here, and I just don't think it's something that you can look out and go, okay, well, cool, we can make this work.
Yeah.
It's going to be a work in progress. It's not going to be, you know, they're not going to come out of the blocks. I mean, they could, but I don't see them coming out of the blocks, and dominating everybody that they play. And then they got that game they got to go uh, to Oxford coming up early too. So there's a lot of landmines in this role, that's going to be tough to deal with.
Yeah, Oxford's going to be a tough one. They still have they'll obviously have that backfield that I think Lane Kiffin
Mhm.
would have liked to bring with him
Yeah, I
to
think so.
LSU.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And you saw what that Ole Miss team last year looked like and how they were able to kind of play with a chip on their shoulder going into the playoffs, how
Mhm.
well they played in the playoffs. And you wonder how much of that can carry over.
Mhm.
How do you toe the line between motivation and just pure unbridled, anger and vitriol for another person? And are you able to contain that? Because if they aren't able to contain that, then it's going to be an ugly game, and they can very easily get outplayed by LSU. Going in week 3 in a situation that would otherwise be, probably a place that LSU is still in a very vulnerable state in terms of getting their team together and gelling as a unit.
Yeah, and I just think that there's targets on your back, and then there's targets on your back. Um, I think this is one of those things where it's really targets on your back.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to what we were talking about before. Do you have any dark horse candidates isn't that may not be here as potential national champions?
National champions. I mean, it's tough to conceptualize anybody outside maybe the
Mhm.
top 15 winning. Like I feel like once
Right.
you get out there, we're really kind of playing in la la land, hoping that we get another story like Signetti,
Hmm.
which is tough. Maybe you would look to the California schools if you're looking for something, because you have Bob Chesney out there at UCLA, former James Madison guy, just like Kurt Signetti, and he does have 4 and 5 star Nico Iamaleava on the roster, so that's not anything to scoff at. But then the other one I would look at that I really like is another new head coach in California, and that's Tosh Lupoy, and that's mainly because he's got Jaren Kiawe Sagapotele at
Hmm.
quarterback, and he was fantastic his freshman season. They play in a weak ACC, all things considered. I know that well, people say, well, there's Miami, and that's true. But in terms of the top talent, unless Clemson's able to come back and really establish themselves, there's room up there, to establish yourself this season, and they have the quarterback talent alone to do it.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people. You say California, and they look at you like you're going crazy. And California's got a good has got a very talented group of kids.
Yeah, they do. They weren't a bad football team last year,
No.
but and they brought in or Tosh Lupul was Oregon's defensive coordinator, and
Right.
you have a chance to really get a guy that can be right and kind of give a program some juice that has honestly kind of been lacking it for a while.
Hmm. I will say this, and it's really to me one of the big and important things is that the the thing that to me is important in the Big Ten this year is you mentioned it. I think UCLA is going to be a lot better. Now, I don't think they're going to win the championship, but I definitely think that this UCLA team is going to surprise a heck of a lot of teams out there.
Yeah, they definitely have a chance to. And, when you go in and you look at the stats from last year about teams and how, the
Hmm.
lack of success that teams had going west and playing
Hmm.
out west, and how there is a definite hangover to factor into it,
Hmm.
it makes you more concerned if there's that road game at UCLA if they're playing better. Because you
Hmm.
saw, teams that USC last year wasn't fantastic, but they were good enough, and they definitely were good enough to get you on an off day. The same
Hmm.
goes with Washington, and to an extent, UCLA could. It was just not something that you would have expected out of them, and so it now would add a third threat of that, going out west and making that road in the Big Ten a little bit more difficult than it is currently.
Well, I just think there were people who just automatically marked off last year a trip to play UCLA as okay. Well, that's a win for us, and I wouldn't go that far right now.
Yeah,
There's
no, absolutely
questions
not.
here. Okay, Tombe, sorry to hear about passing Bill Rasmussen. I'm here in Hartford. He worked for the Whalers when Bill was part of the broadcast and marketing team. A true innovator for sure. Absolutely, he was. Um, and you know, he was. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I forgot to mention that Bill was a very good a very good broadcaster in his own right. Um, he was Bill was a character. There's no question about it. Bill was absolutely a character, a visionary, and a pretty smart dude who continued to put together programming long after he left ESPN, and was quite the character. And yeah, unfortunately for him, the Hartford Whalers decided to move to North Carolina, which forced him to push the ESPN situation. So it was a good news, bad news thing. The good news was, he had something to. He was a visionary enough to get there. The bad news for the Whalers was he wasn't with them anymore. So yeah, it was quite the interesting situation to be sure. So again, rest in peace, Bill Rasmussen. Um, Looking at the conferences, the I think the most competitive one right off the bat to me, and you brought up a little earlier, it's either going to be the ACC or the Big 12. I'm not sure who's at the big. I mean, there's three or four teams in each of those conferences that could end up winning that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that has a little bit when you go back to the conversations that we had about the value of these conferences.
Mm-hmm.
You this pops up in terms of where you think the concentration is going to be, and they don't have those standalone brands that maybe you're just kind of banking on. Like, I think people are banking on Ohio State. They're banking on Oregon year in and year out. They're banking on Georgia. They're banking on Texas being these
Mm-hmm.
dominant programs, and you can't really say the same in the ACC. I think you can bank on Miami, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the Big Ten's banking on Texas Tech,
Right.
but outside of that is those were just because those were the teams that were successful last year,
Uh-huh.
and that's where you see there's not this perennial power that you can like I said, you would like to believe in Miami, you would like to believe in Texas Tech, but you kind of need to see it to believe it in a very big way with those schools, because the ACC less less than the Big 12, because the Big
Mhm.
12 has seen them come and gone, and the ACC has seen a little bit more staying power in the teams that
Right.
have been good. But you look back a couple of years ago, and Arizona State is right there, almost in the semifinal, and then the next year they're missing the playoff. Like that's
Mhm.
where you're at in the Big 12, and the way that these teams, how volatile that environment's been.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are might be surprised about Utah, and for that matter, Arizona.
Yeah, Utah's an interesting case just because they did have the change in head coach.
Hmm.
You know, and what Kyle Whittingham did there, again, somehow feels like it gets, you know, flown under the radar.
Right.
But that is a big loss in losing the head coach. And I get that they got one of his disciples.
Hmm.
But again, you're asking somebody to replicate, over how many was it? How many years was he at Utah straight? It was 20 plus, wasn't it?
Oh, easy.
Yeah. And so you're asking somebody to kind of, I guess, essentially try to recreate that in a way. And that's not easy to do over one off season. It's hard to replace somebody like that.
It's yeah, it's almost impossible. Um, and I think the thing that I think is going to be the most interesting thing out there is he did put together, and this is what a lot of folks who don't understand Kyle Whittingham. He didn't set them up for failure. Okay, he left them with a good, totally good core of players, and I do think you know something that we all would hope to be able to say is he didn't raid the he didn't go out there and raid Utah and take a bunch of players away from them.
Yeah, I think in some cases, if I remember correctly, he was telling some players to stay put.
He did.
Um, so there is that. And I think that's something that really is has turned some football fans sour, I guess, in terms of college football is, when a coach leaves, now they bring players with them. And
Right.
that's something that's very real. So when they leave, they can decimate the roster with their departure. And that's not something that he did. And I think that's good because I don't think he did it because of this, but he was probably very aware of the goodwill that he has in Utah and what that
Hmm.
would do to that goodwill were he to, decimate that roster.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with that, and a lot of it had to do with Michigan wanting Michigan to, they had a lot of recruits that were headed that way anyway. Um, but getting to Kyle, Kyle was on the staff of Urban Meyer, which gives you an idea how long he's been there, right? And
Mhm.
and I think what he looked at and said, you know what, um, if I'll go to Michigan and succeed with players that I can get to Michigan. I don't need or want to destroy a program that, in essence, he built. Um, and there was some, I think, some grace in showing that what I I don't want to destroy a program that I helped build.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it just
And
shows you the
look,
kind of quality person he is.
I will say it is a bit easier for Kyle Whittingham, and this is not like any person, but he's going from Utah to Michigan, so it's not like he's making a level step by any means.
No, it's not a lateral, not a lateral change.
Yeah, so he does have the luxury of walking into what is a rather full, cupboard in terms of what he's
Yeah.
got available to him. I mean, good God, the quarterback he has a chance to be one of the best to play the game in terms
Right.
of his physical abilities alone.
Hmm.
And they're a team that people are kind of, picking as a sleeper in the Big Ten right now, and a lot of
Hmm.
that has to do with that quarterback. So he
Hmm.
didn't really need it. He did get I believe, the edge rusher daily
Right.
from Utah, but that I think that was his one of, if not his only addition from there.
Yeah, I think there were 3 to 4 kids that went with him, but that was their choice, not his.
Yeah.
It was only after he was announced as coach. Um, and I'll tell you, one of the things that I've noticed from Utah fans, and there are a lot of, I have a lot of friends who are Utah fans and BYU fans as well, but Utah fans. And I was on a show out of KSL in Salt Lake City not long ago, and you know the love and the respect and the admiration that people still have for Kyle Whittingham is not just surprising, but it's kind of like you feel like, what, it. I think Lane Kiffin could have gotten this if he handled it right, by coaching, by not bolting at Ole Miss and just playing the season out and taking them through the playoffs. I think he might have gotten this kind of love, but that they didn't look at it that way. Um, over in Oxford and out in Salt Lake City, he's highly revered. He bought a couple of ads in newspapers out there thanking the Utah fan base. I mean, to be honest, I mean Kyle played at BYU and then coached at Oregon. I mean at Utah, so he spent a lot of time out there, and I just think that was just showed a class act. And what do you think? I mean, I'm a little surprised, not surprised. I'm a little interested in seeing what Kenny Dillingham has out of Arizona State. We're talking about Big 12 now.
Yeah, it's interesting, going into this season because things are fresh,
Mm-hmm.
and I think last year was a little bit more proof of still where Arizona State is as a program.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the things that left, and your starting backfield does leave.
Mm-hmm.
Rayleigh Brown is now a Longhorn. Sam Levitt is now at LSU, and those were two.
Got a little audio problem there with Matthew. Hopefully, in a second he'll come back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good with you again. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it was a reiteration of kind of where the program is. So now they are in a place where this is a team that has to go in and reload through the portal, and you're not getting the top of the line guys, but you're getting those second tier guys,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to hit and you have to make sure these guys are fits in your system, because if they aren't, you find out very quickly what life can be like as a second tier school in Power 4 football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the um, the one head scratcher, and I know the Cougar fans are all going to get all over me for this. Um, I like what they've done in Houston, but I'm not sure that I'm buying that they're a championship team.
Yeah, that
I
feels
mean,
like
a
a bit of a
conference
stretch.
championship, not a national championship.
Yeah, they had a good year last year. That feels like a little bit of a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that Connor Wegman's coming back at quarterback. I could be
Mm-hmm.
wrong about that.
Yeah, he is.
So they have that going for them. And when you want to look for success, I think you look at a team that performed well last year and brings back their starting quarterback and
Mm-hmm.
their head coach, then you have high expectations. And that is absolutely a reason for hope. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it's about building a full, complete roster. And I still think for all that they've lost and the way things have gone in the offseason, it's going to be tough to match up with Texas Tech's roster in a championship setting, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And BYU, who last season had a good year. Um, it'll be interesting to see how they handle it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's BYU's now kind of in the camp to where Kalani Sitake has at least earned my trust
Mm-hmm.
going forward. I believe maybe not that they'll win, a Big 12 champion, but they're going to be in the conversation for the Big 12 championship year in and year out. Kind of regardless of what they did in the portal. I believe in what they do over there more than anything in their culture. Kind of the same way that you would believe in Utah. I now believe in BYU in a similar sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's good enough. One of those situations where, there's a lot of new coaches throughout college football, and they're at good big programs. So, I mean, you really don't know what to expect because there's a bunch of new coaches with two new teams, and we could be surprised by a bunch of places. I mean, who's going to be the next Indiana, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what everybody's now going to be chasing. I'm curious to see what I feel like you may have gotten a taste of it last off season,
right?
But with the success of Kurt Cignetti, I'm curious to see how that accelerates, coaching markets going into this off season, and how that changes, I guess, warps reality, because in sports in general, there's an overwhelming lack of patience from every fan base in every sport.
You think?
Yeah. So college football, and I will reiterate, this is a bit more applicable in the South. I feel like the South, the SEC, their clocks on their coaches runs a little bit faster than maybe the rest of the country. Big Ten probably pulling second there.
That may be the understatement of the year there.
Yeah, things tick a little quicker. And now I wonder, does the clock somehow speed up on some of these guys, and how long their leashes are? How quick are you to bail on guys now? Is this a situation where, if Shane Beamer's got a couple losses in his first 6 weeks, is he on his way out the door already? From a potentially dangerous South Carolina team, could you almost take a mine off the map in a way with some of these talented teams that maybe are going to pull the trigger fast on some coaches?
Yeah. And that it's going to happen. So that brings us to where we always were. Well, actually, we were last season. What's going on? Does Mike Norvell make it?
You have to almost chalk things up to money problems at FSU. Right. FSU does not have a lot of funds currently for their athletic programs, specifically, football, in terms of their spending.
$50 million buyout.
Yeah. And so that kind of handcuffs Florida State and what they're willing to do. It may be a horribly kept secret, or I may just be cooking something up in my head here, but it seems like pretty common knowledge that had they had the funds available, Mike Norvell would not be the head coach at Florida State right now. If they felt like they could pull the trigger on spending
that's a very fair observation.
So it's not like they're with him because, they love him. They're with him because they have to be with him. And, is something going to magically change in the season to where they feel comfortable spending that money, or are they just going to try to invest in this guy and hope that he can turn it around with the funds they have available?
Well, I think for right now, that's their only shot.
Yeah. Which is why you saw them take the direction that they chose to go in, going into the season. And, it's still going to be I think it's going to be a long season for Florida State fans. I don't know if it's going to be as bad as last year, but it's going to be rough. I mean, it was Alabama, they won a couple in a row and then they fell off a cliff. And I'm not sure you're going to get the same high as Alabama this year.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting situation. I mean, you follow the SEC about as much as anybody. Is there a dark horse there?
I mean, I've talked about South Carolina and how much I like South Carolina. They have playmakers and their best players at the right spots on the field. Now, granted, some of these guys didn't perform as well last year, and they've got to return back to that level. But they have the ability, when they are able to run the football well, they can be one of the most dangerous teams in the country because of the quarterback that they have to run that offense and
Mm-hmm.
really make their running game a significant threat because of the options they have available. And then you've got the dynamic wide receiver in Nick Harbor. I'm just gonna shorten his first name
Yeah,
since it's
that's a
easier
good
that way.
idea.
And then on defense, you trust their secondary and what they have back there. And then on the line, you have Dylan Stewart coming back, which should be, he's enough to take up two bodies every snap. And
Mm-hmm.
that means that your other three have to go win. And they have the ability to do that.
Right. It's I mean, it's a good football team, and to be honest, let's be fair. I mean, you don't often look at South Carolina as as a team that's going to win the SEC championship.
Yeah, no. And look, their schedule isn't the easiest in the world. I know that.
Mhm.
But they still have a chance to do something special this year. I remember a couple of years ago, they were 9-3 lobbying to get in the playoffs.
Hmm.
After finishing out their season really well. And I think they have a chance to be in a similar situation come the end of the year this year.
I get a lot of questions about Tennessee, and I'll be honest, I have no idea how to answer it. You know, each year you look at Tennessee and you go, that's not a bad roster, and they got good coaches, but somehow they seem to constantly disappoint.
Yeah, yes, definitely some questions, in Knoxville. They're going to have the true freshman, Brandon Faison, I believe, is going to end up being their starter. And so these kids are probably more accelerated than they've ever been in terms of getting to the college level. But as there are with all things in terms of jumping levels in sports, there's growing pains. And when do you feel those growing pains? Where do you feel those growing pains? And really, how much do they bite you in the ass?
Right.
Because I mean, this kid's a 5-star. Like he's all world talented, but again, you can't expect him to come in and really be the savior of the program because when you expect that out of a freshman 5-star, it's near impossible expectations to heap on a kid, and they have to be able to run the football well. They've done that well there,
Hmm.
specifically with their ability and those wide splits to lighten the box. They've been really effective in their run game with Josh Heupel as head coach. They're going to have to be able to do that well this year, just to kind of protect that kid and really let him kind of almost ease his way into the year.
Right. Well, it's gonna be challenging from that standpoint for sure. Um, we talked a little bit about the Big Ten. I I still think I totally agree with you that that I, I would have had Oregon one and Ohio State two if I was going for Big Ten.
Yeah, I think some of it comes. I think there's a little bit of a sense of doubt in terms of I don't think people really trust Julian Sayin.
Yeah.
And I think he has the ability to be really good, but I still think he has to kind of go prove it to the national media, even though they are number one, even though they are the number one team in the nation. So I think when
Mhm.
people draw their concerns, I think a lot of it goes back to that. And look, they're not going to have the same defense they had last year. They're just not.
No.
They lost a lot of good pieces off that defense, and there's no way around that. But it's not like they're getting replaced with bums. I think there's reasonable skepticism for Ohio State. I think in terms of the rosters they've had over the past 2 years, this one's not as good. But just because it's not as good doesn't mean it can't win a national title.
Excuse me. For some reason we've got my there we go. For some reason the auto read popped on when we were in the middle of your conversation there. So if you want to pick it back up a bit, we can do that.
Yeah, I was just saying
Technical
that.
difficulty. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that Ohio State's roster, even though it may not be as good as the last 2 years, whether it be offensively or defensively, and the questions that people have regarding Julian Sayin. They brought back Jeremiah Smith, and that's going to help any young quarterback. Even though now Julian's played a year, they have the ability to win a national title, even though their roster isn't as good as it's been the last 2 years.
Right. It's an interesting thing to be sure, and I think we're all going to be surprised at what's going on coming up in uh, in college football this year. It should be a good season. It's it's going to be very interesting, and throughout the entire time, we're also going to have hovering over us that whether or not that the Save College Sports Act gets through, because that comes back up in September.
Yeah, I hope that does not cast a dark cloud over this college football season.
Um, I don't think it will. I just think it will be something that is on everybody's radar, and there's a whole bunch of people that are looking at it and seeing what's going to happen, how's it going to work. Um, I totally believe, from my standpoint anyway, that we're looking at we're really looking at the opportunity to see this is going to be a Big Ten SEC deal. In other words, this deal is not going to pass unless those two conferences want it to pass.
Yeah, no, it's not.
So the way it's going to be written, there's going to be something there that's going to protect people.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that we can keep an eye on. But I don't think that it's going to be it'll be bogged down and stopped if the SEC and the Big Ten want it to be bogged down and stopped.
yeah, which is what I always kind of assumed it would be. They do run the show in terms of college athletics now.
They do, and good, bad, or otherwise. It's something I think that for a lot of reasons we who are fans are kind of hanging on it. Um, a lot of people, of course, who want to see the big the ACC vanish from the face of the earth, um, have these elaborate plans of where all these teams are going. Uh, I just don't think there's going to be that kind of shakeup um, at this point in time. I just don't see that happening. I don't think the conferences. Do you think that the SEC needs four more teams?
No, I don't think they would ever take on 4 more teams. There's no value in it.
I mean, they can get the money without it,
Yeah,
and I just don't see why you would. You've got a arguably the best conference in the country. Why do I need another group?
yeah, yeah. It's you know it's a move that wouldn't make sense in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think that a lot of people are saying, well, we're going to see a lot of stuff going up on on with regard to uh, the Big Ten. They're going to want to go to 24, and it's like I don't. Why? I mean, there's no need. There's just no value in adding teams. I mean, just more sometimes is just more, and I don't see where it is a big advantage to take that.
Yeah,
And
and
look, I could be wrong, and I've been wrong many times before, but I just don't see. I mean, to me, Florida State and Clemson in the SEC, doesn't bring on anything that I think that anybody truly cares about.
No, and it confuses the footprints too. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Big Ten has their footprint. I don't know how successful they would be as they tried to dip into the Southern footprint.
Well, I don't think it would work. Um, there's not. I mean, the the SEC. The reason the SEC is successful is it stayed regional to its footprint. Now you could argue, okay, well, Missouri's not exactly the footprint, and that's a fair point. Uh, Oklahoma and Texas just kind of stretched the southeast out into the southwest. So there, you're stretching it, but you're not trying to be a bi-coastal team, which is what a national, from sea to shining sea type thing that the Big Ten did. And I'm not sure that helped the Big Ten, to be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I think you could, still reasonably question as to why they made that move and how
Mm-hmm.
much it's helped both parties. I don't know if either party. I would say the Big Ten's probably benefited from the addition of the members more than the members have benefited from being in the Big Ten to
Mm-hmm.
this point. Um, but it's still one that I think there are a lot of people that still don't love it.
Well, I know that SEC fans would not want to see. Um, I know a lot of SEC fans who don't want them to go to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. I mean, they, um, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia. It's like, why do we need them?
Yeah, and that's understandable too because they're not necessary additions. Again, when you're looking at what these conferences could add off these teams, where's your necessary addition? What what really changes or significantly adds to your conference and your conference's identity?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's going to be a debate that we'll be having for a long time, and not too in the future. So, one way or another, we got a couple of other quick ones here. Hello, everyone. Rays continue to win. Can continue win streak. They won one game in a row, guys. The Bucks. Okay, no Rays. Okay. The Rays played Toronto. They beat the folks at from Baltimore in what is crazy, and we'll get into that a little more tomorrow. But Matt, what do you think? I mean, the Orioles right now set in the final playoff spot, but they're 8 teams within 2 games of each other.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun race down the stretch.
Yeah.
It it's fascinating just how many teams still have a shot. I mean, there are
Yeah.
teams in there that sold. You think about the Orioles, and they traded away Adley Rutschman. They're in a playoff spot. You look at the
Right.
Tigers and where they're at in relation to the playoffs, and the fact that they
Right.
traded Tarek Skubal. Like
Mm-hmm.
these are significant players that they traded away, and they're still right in the thick of their playoff races. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Baltimore being there just kind of reiterates the depth that there is in the AL East and how much better of a division it is than the rest of the AL.
Mm-hmm. Can the Rays hold on to the division lead? The answer is yes. Will they? I don't know. Um, they should. They should. I mean, I don't know when the Yankees are going to get you know their guys back, or
If
if they're going to get their
back,
guys back.
yeah,
So I don't know about that. Uh, I think that if they can play 500 ball the rest of the way, which there's no reason to believe that they can't. I think they can still hold on and win the division. But there's always people who can take a run. I think the last week of the season, 10 days, frankly, of the season, will be key for them. They've got the Red Sox at home for a 3-game series. They got 4 games in Yankee Stadium, and then they finished the season in Philadelphia. So that's no easy trek for them. And Boston's playing better. And again, I don't know where the Yankees are at this point. And we have 6 weeks to go. And right now, I would not count them out of being able to win that division. Um, but there's some talent behind them. Um, it's going to be, just it goes down to the old saying, just taking care of their own business. And I think that's where we're going to see. And some teams match up that way. I mean, you look at it. Um, Tampa Bay swept Baltimore in Baltimore. Then, then Baltimore came back and swept them in Tampa, and then they had they had 4 games in a row this past week, and then the Orioles took 3 of them, and the Braves took the game last night. All of them were close except for one, and there are just some teams that play you very, very hard, regardless of what their records are.
Yeah, yeah, they're just some teams that have other teams' numbers, and that's
Mm-hmm.
typically the way it goes in the AL East. Is everybody's kind of just a thorn in the side for everybody, and this is really an opportunity for the Rays to create a little bit of separation.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing it with the way they play,
Mm-hmm.
but they really have to take this opportunity because both Boston and New York, they're dealing with injuries currently. I know Boston has kind of fallen into a little bit of a lull after their
Mm-hmm.
couple of win streaks. And so they need to take this opportunity and have been taking this opportunity to build up a bit of a lead because both those teams are going to get a little bit healthier down the
Mm-hmm.
stretch.
Right. And I think one of the things that they're finding out, um, I'm talking about Tampa Bay now, is that some of these guys that they traded for are now getting some play, and they're finding out these guys have been really, you know, um, very. They're going to be very helpful to them in the stretch run, and if they go to the playoffs, into the playoff runs. So that's a good thing. I think one of the things that they're very encouraged is that Freddie Peralta, even though that game that they lost, I believe it was 10-2 or 10-4, whatever. Um, Freddie Peralta pitched really well in that game, and he had a little issue with getting some guys on base in in the 5th inning, but up into the 5th inning, he'd done pretty well. So I think he's showing improvement. Um, Liam Hicks, the kid that they got from Miami, was a steal. Um, he's done nothing but you know been a fantastic you know uh, protector for Junior Caminero, and he's a good catcher as well. So that was kind of a steal. So we'll see. I mean, look, there's a long way to go, and the great thing about baseball is you don't know what you don't know, and you know, um, wild cards in Major League Baseball have always been thorns in the side of everybody. So I wouldn't count any of it out. New Race player good last night. Yeah, they had some. There's a kid they got from Baltimore who was playing shortstop who hit a home run and made some phenomenal defensive plays for them last night. So yeah, they play Toronto for the weekend. The Orioles go up to the Bronx to play the Yankees. Who the Red Sox get this week?
They've got the Diamondbacks right now.
Yeah, right. Okay. Who are fighting for themselves in a battle. So
And
there's a
just
lot.
lost Ketel Marte to the restricted list.
I'm sorry.
Just lost Ketel Marte to the restricted list.
That's not good.
No.
So, well, we will talk much more about baseball, and we just wanted to take a quick look at the top 25 in college sports, and of course the breaking news about the passing of Bill Rasmussen. So that's been our morning thus far, and we hope that you all have a great day, and and we shall be back here tomorrow and talk some baseball. All right. Until then, everybody, for Matthew, I'm Jim. Take care.